Hello everyone, Freight Master Resources here. So I wanted to talk to you guys today a little bit about niches, okay? We've talked about niches in previous videos, and it was more, I guess, directed at those brand new to the industry, right? General dry van freight probably being the easiest to get started in, or maybe building materials like lumber, plywood, shingles, bricks, that kind of thing. Being there in that same category. But one thing I think a lot of brokers probably don't think about is what are known as specialty niches or micro niches. Okay, so with micro niches, you're looking for things like, just for example, like microchips, semiconductors, airplane parts, white glove service, things like this, things that, or maybe you have a hobby or a favorite product or something, and you know what I mean? Maybe it's not an overly popular type hobby or something. Even it's a specialty. It's a niche within a niche kind of a thing, basically. So reach out to those shippers that ship your favorite types of things or things that you might be interested in. Number one, that's going to help you get your foot in the door with them, because you're going to have some working knowledge of that product, right? And you'll be more relatable to them with that. Okay, and then on top of that, once you do start to move that freight, you become like an expert in that niche, right? In that micro niche or that specialty niche, and you'll become their go-to broker for all of it, or at least a majority of it, right? And the reason I wanted to kind of talk about this today was because, a lot of freight shippers out there, they have like email blast lists, and you're competing against 10, 20, 50 other brokers for the same loads, and there might be 5 loads, there might be 100 loads, but you're all fighting for them. But with the micro niche or specialty niches, you become like that person, you become that broker, you're the go-to, right? You're the expert in that area, and it can be very, very profitable. I mean, we're talking mid 6 figures. The downfall with working in micro niches is that you're working with a very small market, like, it could be only maybe 23%, and then finding carriers that haul that type of freight or that are familiar with that type of freight, right? So you want to be kind of careful. Find something, like I said, use something that you're interested in, some sort of specialty or something, to kind of identify those micro niches, right? And along with that, this kind of goes with, like we talked about, goal setting, right? Well, one of the things we didn't talk about was having vision. You have to have vision to set goals. Like, where do you want to be? So these kind of like go hand in hand, right? And so like I said, find those carriers that are able to do that, or maybe you're a carrier yourself, and you're looking to get into a micro niche, because a lot of shippers will not work with typically like one owner operator, right? But in a micro niche, they're probably not shipping out like, hundreds of loads a day. So, you don't need to be a fleet, or maybe you're a really small carrier with like 3 trucks or something, but you can service that shipper. Okay. So, don't be afraid to reach out to them, and practice, and don't give up. Guys, if you have any questions on this, I do have the live chat open. By all means, pick my brain. Okay. And we can talk right now. I mean, I've got some free time, so I figured I'd jump on and kind of talk about this. But if there's something on this topic or maybe another topic, by all means, we can kind of jump around here a little bit. but yeah, identify those niches. Like I said, we actually just jumped into another micro niche that I think it's looking like it's going to be very, very profitable for us. We'll probably end up moving roughly right around 1,000 loads a week for this particular shipper. So specialty equipment, that's another thing. I mean, I touched on that a little bit about, using carriers that, are able to handle that type of freight. Some of your oversized freight, like over-dimensional or overweight type freight. I know a broker, that's all they do. They only handle like OD and overweight freight. And some of this stuff is so huge that they actually have to have like the power companies come and raise the power lines for these trucks to get through, and it becomes quite challenging because in addition to your permits and all these other things, like there's a lot of moving parts, right? So if you're brand new before I go any further, if you're brand new to freight brokering, I do not suggest you attempt doing this. But if you've had your feet wet, you've been into brokering for a little while now, but you're just kind of wanting to get into something new, maybe something a little more specialized. This is what this video is for you, right? More than somebody that's brand new, or even if you are brand new, maybe something to think about. Once you do have confidence and you've kind of mastered a certain other niche, right? And then you can kind of narrow that down if you choose to do so. But sometimes some of these power companies are like that, they have to go and basically have them come out, meet the truck, and this is all set up in advance, right? Because the truck can't just sit there and block traffic for hours and days on end, right? So what happens is like you have like sometimes there'll be several different power companies, and they all have like one line is XYZ, the other one's ABC, and another one is LMO. So it gets to be quite challenging. Like I said, with your escorts, your permits, all these kinds of things that are involved, but they do very, very well at what they do, right? Because they've become an expert in their field. Robert, great question. How do you find carriers outside of the load board? Well, use the Facebook groups. We have a Facebook group, and jump on there, become a member, reach out to some of these carriers. There's carriers all day long. When I look, they're looking to connect with brokers. There's independent dispatchers out there looking to connect with shippers and brokers. Right now, it's probably easier to find carriers than it has in quite a while, because everybody's looking for freight. And a lot of drivers that I talked to lately that I don't already have some sort of a working relationship with, some of these guys are sitting 3, 4, 5 days without a load. So, use LinkedIn. Connect with them on LinkedIn. If you have freight and then say Norfolk, Virginia, start looking up trucking companies in Norfolk, Virginia to connect to. Just call them up. Say, hey, I've got freight, and discuss it with them. Find out what their pain points are too. Start to build that relationship with them. Great question. Thank you. How do you find carriers before you decide on your micro niche? Well, this is kind of where a certain amount of research comes in, right? So like using the example of that friend of mine that does primarily over-dimensional and overweight freight, he reached out, like I mentioned, reach out to carriers out of Norfolk or something. He's built over time a relationship with carriers that handle that sort of freight. And Google is probably going to be a really good friend of yours. Again, the Facebook groups, or some of them are specialized. So like if you were looking to get into like over-dimensional freight or something like that, look up, carriers that, RGN groups or something, that type of thing, so kind of like the old let your fingers do the walking sort of a thing, with the old yellow pages and whatnot. I hope that answered your question. Yeah, don't forget to utilize your social media resources as well. Can we as brokers with no assets broker containers from the ports? Yes. I have had in the past. I actually had done some of that early on in my career. I had some freight forwarders that I worked with, and they didn't really care if I was asset based or not, as long as I was consistent with the trucks, right? Trucks and chassis. And then obviously they've got to have, TWIC card and things like that, or some places will let them pay a small fee for an escort or something. But yeah, great question. Yeah, absolutely. And all you have to do probably with that is just, like I said, so many times you can utilize Google. Just look up freight forwarders. And if you have a particular port that you're looking to reach out to, sometimes those freight and customs brokers too. Customs brokers will know where some of that freight is, right? So, and some of them are customs brokers and freight forwarders are all kind of a big conglomerate there. That's probably the best way to go. I have had shippers, once it hits the port, they basically they don't want the freight forwarder working on it anymore. And they've and we've obviously had some sort of working relationship, and they asked me if that was something that I could handle for them, and I said sure. Let me talk to a couple of my carriers who specialize in picking up containers at the ports, and let me get a price for you, and I'll be back with you shortly. Not necessarily. Would be considered a co-broker agreement. Freight forwarders are different than freight brokers. I've never been required to sign a co-broker agreement with a freight forwarder. They're similar in what we do, but they actually do more because they handle overseas shipments and customs and all of that happy fun stuff, right? I'm not really uber knowledgeable on what a freight forwarder does. I mean, I do have some knowledge, but I'm no expert in it by any means. At one point in time, I had thought about looking into it, but I was comfortable with where I was at. I like brokering freight, but yeah, and sometimes they will prefer that you have assets or something, but it's not a deal breaker. And typically, a lot of those, okay, this brings me to another point. Whether it's working with a freight forwarder or any other shipper, right? Maybe they're shipping widgets out of Dallas. It doesn't matter. When you make those cold calls and they say, "Well, are you asset based?" No, we're not. Or even if you are an asset based company, those assets 99.9% of the time are already on other dedicated freight. So the odds of you getting your company's assets to work on your new customer's freight are slim to none, typically, right? Unless you're maybe a new startup and you don't already have that freight. So, and I've had shippers, I've called them up, prospect, and they said, oh, well, we're really only looking for assets. I understand. It's just, I've got, a really great working relationship with some carriers that work with me directly. I typically have them over there, anywhere between 7 and 15 times a week, and I would, while we are asset based, I don't want to promise you that we can put, your freight on our trucks. Because it probably just won't ever happen. It's a waste of your time and mine for us to pursue that avenue, right? So let's just not. And actually, they kind of turned around and said, you know what? I appreciate your honesty about that. And you sound like you're, being straightforward with me about things. So why don't you go ahead and send me over your packet? Get me over that credit sheet, and we'll get rocking and rolling. And so you don't necessarily have to be asset based with anything. In fact, I find it easier not to be asset based. And we are asset based, but there again, our trucks are primarily on other dedicated freight. The only time we ever maybe put a load on one of our assets that on a customer that isn't already working with them directly is if maybe they had a load cancel on them for some reason, or something happened, and then in which case then they kind of say, hey, who has a load for me out of Salt Lake City, Utah or something. But yeah. Any other questions, guys? Anything else I can answer you on regular niches, or I say regular niches, but on niches, micro niches, specialty niches? Like I said, I'm here to pick my brain. I love the interaction. I really do. This is awesome. This is why I prefer to do these videos live, right? So you guys can ask me questions like this, and then rather than waiting maybe 12 hours or something for a response from me, you're armed and ready to go for tomorrow morning. But yeah, look at other specialty trucking like trailer types. Maybe it's tankers, or hazmat. All these kinds of things can be, or at least somewhat, sort of a specialty niche, right? Away from your typical general freight. Even some of your refrigerated freight can be specialized, right? And some of that comes with certain requirements, and like insurance, for instance, things like that. I am trying to go live more often here now. Things got really kind of chaotic, and every time I tried to do regular videos, it seemed like something was happening. I was working till midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, or had something going on, typically always work related. But I'm trying to kind of scale that back a little bit. And this is another reason why I brought up this topic, is because I'm going to kind of focus right now for myself personally, not the rest of our team, right? But for myself personally, and kind of handing off some of my other freight. I'm going to focus on this particular micro niche that I'm working on, and that's going to allow me some more time for this and the Facebook group and family and all kinds of things, right? And I keep wanting to get some things updated on the websites that I haven't really had time to do, because for literally like the last almost 2 weeks, I've been going almost non-stop, probably 20 hours a day, 22 sometimes. So yeah, I actually kind of want to make it every Monday thing, but I did that regular video the other day, and then I did the short. But yeah, I'm gonna try to make it every Monday. This is just kind of an off day for me right now. So, yeah, we got all kinds of other things to talk about. Have you guys tried the new DAT1 yet? Are you guys using Power and switched over to the DAT1? I know it's a little bit different, but I seem to enjoy it. There's some things I miss about Power, but I do like the DAT1. And have you guys tried the strategy on getting through the gatekeeper from the video that I did yesterday? Or maybe you haven't had a chance to watch it yet. But that was really something I wish I had known, especially when I first started out, right? I was getting creamed when I first started. Okay, not a big deal. I'm not sure how long you've, or exactly how new you are. If you're in your first week, your first month, or whatever. I've talked to some people, they were 6 months in and didn't have their first shipper. Their first year in and didn't have a shipper. Like I said, once you find, any kind of a niche, like I said, look at building materials, lumber, shingles, bricks, that kind of thing, pallets even. Anything that's like general type dry van freight, right? Typically those customers are easier to get into and kind of get your feet wet and help you kind of build things up before you start to really like diversify your portfolio or jump into a micro niche or something like that. Just like I said, and leads are all around us. Like when you go to the grocery store, Home Depot, wherever, go to your pantry, go to anything else that you might have laying around your house, right? Here, I've got a box actually because I was munching on these earlier. Here's Ritz, a box of Ritz. Right here, mulled. I'm gonna see. I don't know if you guys can see that. Oh, come on, camera. All right. Anyway, on the side of the label there, it says Mandela's Global LLC, East Hanover, New Jersey, right? So I would probably look up that company, maybe on LinkedIn or if you have Zoom Info or something, and I would look them up and find out who the decision maker is and call and ask for them. But and then have my script prepared or whatever. And if you are new, you probably have a script, right? I don't anymore. I don't really like scripts, but I understand the use of them when you're new. But typically I just jump in, say, hey Joe, this is Tim over at XYZ. How you doing today? Fine, and you? I was thinking, who the heck is Tim over at XYZ, or whatever. And hey, not going to take up too much of your time. Reason for the call is I have typically 10 to 15 trucks within a 20-mile radius of your location every day or every week, however you want to phrase that. And we are constantly looking for backhauls or outbound loads, from that area. Just calling to find out if you keep your options open for additional carriers or additional capacity or however you want to phrase that, right? That's probably how I would approach that, sort of on the fly. And then they might go into the, well, are you asset based? No, Joe, I'm not. But let me tell you, I've got a really great working relationship with some carriers that works almost strictly for me. We've got dedicated freight, like I said, into your area. We're just looking to, maybe put a dumbbell together or something. They might ask you, well, what areas do they, typically like to go to, right? So if this place is located in New Jersey, we run all 40 lower 48. Simple as that. I've got a few guys that they only want to run to Kentucky and back. I've got guys that don't really care where they go to, that kind of thing. But yeah, you've got to pick up that phone and call. The old school rule of thumb is make 100+ calls a day. If you can do 2, sales is all about the numbers, right? And it's so huge in what we do because once you get the customer, things start going, right? They start sending you over freight. You start building carrier relationships. Pick up another customer. Next thing you know, you've got a portfolio, and with your portfolio comes profit. And, keeping your carriers happy and your customers happy. You've got great communication between all three. Like I said in previous videos, typically what my goal is to create what I call a happy marriage between all three parties. I try to make everything work, and the communication, the rate, everything, to where my shipper is happy, my carrier is happy, and I'm happy. If one of those things is not, if somebody's not happy for whatever reason, then I'm not happy, and typically things fall apart. One of the biggest things is communication. I've got some of my customers, they just don't communicate very well when things change. It's, driver showed up and he's like, "Hey Tim, why is this like this now?" Well, hold on, let me find out. "Oh, we had a last minute change about an hour ago. You could have let me know," right? Or maybe a carrier, like not all of my freight requires tracking, but I've got some carriers, like, "Oh, we got a new guy, he didn't accept it, sorry, da 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 da," but it's time sensitive freight, right? So that's another thing. Speaking of time sensitive freight, if you don't mind me a little bit rambling here, and I'll get your comment out there. Is when speaking of time sensitive freight, your freight forwarders oftentimes will have expedited freight for cargo vans, sprinter vans, straight trucks, that kind of thing. Build relationships with those. Those loads typically pay very well to your carrier and to you, and they're like overnight runs. Some of them, for instance, we had a load. It was for a cargo van, picked up in New Jersey, had to be in Detroit the next morning by 8 a.m. It was some prototype for General Motors that it was built over in Europe somewhere, and they literally were like down to the deadline getting this thing done. It was in a 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot square box, and that was the only thing. It had to be dedicated on that cargo van. They could not pick up anything else with it. So they paid for a full van, and for it to be expedited, picked up at like 11 o'clock that night, had to be there at 8 o'clock in the morning. Team drivers, boom, that load paid. And that stuff will happen. So that's another thing. And that's not something that's like overly specialized, right? So like maybe you started to move, you're 6 months in and moving your general freight. Don't be afraid to jump in and maybe try some of that expedited freight. Or, if you have a shipper that ships partials, look at your straight truck options, your sprinter vans, things like that, and like I said, don't forget to utilize your social media, your Facebook groups. Some of them are better than others. Some of them get to be a little spammy. If you're already in some of the other Facebook groups, you know what I'm talking about. This is some really unrelated, off the wall stuff, and I don't know why they don't keep it moderated. Maybe they do. There's just too much of it, but they need to boot those people or something. Yeah. And don't be afraid to post. Hey, looking to connect with dry van carriers, flatbed carriers, step deck carriers, hotshot carriers, cargo vans, whatever it is. You got to really put yourself out there. And I've even had drivers sometimes give me leads. They know who, they've got a shipper. Maybe they've done some loads for another broker or a couple of other brokers that are working with this particular shipper, but they're not real happy with those brokers. They'll say, "Hey, here's the broker. Here's the decision maker's name." Sometimes they even have the phone number. And if you can get me in, I'd really rather, work these directly with you. Because maybe you've done a few loads with them and they like the way you conduct yourself. They like the way you do business. So sometimes your carriers will give you referrals. So that's why I say your carrier relationships are just as important, if not more so, than your shipper relationships. Some might disagree with me on that, but it's true, because without the shipper, without the carrier, we're nothing. And for most carriers, without the broker and the shipper, they're nothing either. We all need each other. So it's best if we can all get along and work together. Any other questions, guys, before I wrap this up? We're going on about 30 minutes here now. Not that I don't have more time. But I just feel like I kind of covered the whole micro niche topic. So, yeah, don't forget to, like I said, just to kind of, as a kind of a quick recap, if you guys have a hobby or something, or some particular product that you're really big into, that potentially could be a micro niche. Like I said, doesn't necessarily have to be microchips and semiconductors and things. It might just be something that you have an interest in, and if so, that's going to make it so much easier to get into these places, because you have relatable knowledge to that product, right? So don't forget that if you do decide to pursue that, whether it's tomorrow morning or a year or two from now. So, well, hey guys, I really appreciate the questions. I love y'all. I mean, this is fantastic. I love the interaction. And with that, I will let you get back to your Tuesday evening, right? So, as always, be kind to one another, and we'll talk to you next time. Bye.